The massive space station hung in orbit around Kepler Prime like a shining jewel against the black of space. Ships from across the galaxy had gathered here for the annual military exhibition, each one more impressive than the last. The Zephyrian vessels gleamed with crystal hulls that seemed to bend light itself. Their weapons were beams of pure energy that could slice through asteroids like butter. The Hive Collective brought their bioships, living creatures bred for war with hulls that healed themselves and weapons that thought for themselves. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched the alien ships through the view screen. His own ship looked like a museum piece next to them. The hull was made of steel and ceramic, scarred from years of service. Steam leaked from cooling vents along the sides. The fusion reactor hummed with the sound of machinery that other species had abandoned centuries ago. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the Zephyrian flagship," said Lieutenant Commander Beth Collins from her station. "They want to know if we need assistance docking." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Tell them we can manage just fine." The docking bay assigned to humanity was in the oldest section of the station, far from the main exhibition halls. As the Defiant settled into its berth, alien workers stopped to stare. Some pointed at the ship's obvious repairs and patches. Others shook their heads or made sounds that might have been laughter. Admiral Lisa Parker waited in the docking bay, dressed in her formal uniform. She had been humanity's representative to the Galactic Council for 3 years, and she knew how these events went. The humans would be polite, the aliens would be condescending, and everyone would pretend to get along. "Captain Morrison," she said as he walked down the boarding ramp. "Ready for another day of diplomacy?" "As ready as I'll ever be, Admiral," Morrison replied. Behind him came his senior staff. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez wiped grease from his hands with a cloth. Weapons Officer Sam Turner carried a datapad filled with system reports. They all looked like soldiers who had seen real combat, which was more than could be said for most of the alien crews. The exhibition hall was enormous, filled with displays of the galaxy's most advanced military technology. Holographic projections showed battles fought with weapons that existed only in theory. Alien representatives in expensive clothes discussed the finer points of quantum torpedoes and dimensional shields. The human display was modest by comparison. A few models of Earth ships, some technical specifications, and a video showing the Defiant in action during training exercises. Most visitors walked past without stopping. "Fascinating," said a voice behind them. Admiral Parker turned to see Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire approaching. His crystalline skin reflected the hall's lights, and his robes shimmered with embedded technology. "Your species brings museum pieces to a gathering of the galaxy's finest military minds." "Our ships may look old, but they're effective," Parker replied politely. Veltar's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Effective? My dear Admiral, your vessels still use chemical propulsion. Your weapons fire solid projectiles. This is what our children played with thousands of years ago." He gestured toward the human display. "Perhaps your species should focus on agriculture instead of warfare. The galaxy has enough farmers." Other alien representatives had gathered to listen. The architect delegation, beings of living crystal, who built their ships from pure mathematics, whispered among themselves. One of them spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "Their designs lack elegance and sophistication. Where are the quantum harmonics, the dimensional resonance chambers?" A representative from the Luminari, beings of pure energy who existed in specially designed containment suits, added their thoughts. "Chemical propulsion is what children use in toys. How do they expect to fight a real war with such primitive technology?" Morrison felt his hands clench into fists, but Admiral Parker placed a calming hand on his arm. They had discussed this before coming. Getting angry would only prove the aliens' point about human primitiveness. The crowd grew larger as more species joined the discussion. The hegemony's military attaché, a being that looked like a walking tree, observed that human ships had too many moving parts and would break down in real combat. The collective speaker, a hive mind that spoke through a dozen different bodies, suggested that humanity should be classified as a protected species, rather than potential military allies. "Your weapons are particularly amusing. Veltar continued, warming to his subject. Kinetic projectiles? Nuclear explosives? We abandoned such crude methods before your species discovered fire. Modern warfare requires precision, elegance, and above all, intelligence. Your approach is, how do you say, brute force? Sometimes brute force works, Morrison said quietly. Only against equally primitive opponents, Veltar replied. Against a truly advanced enemy, your ships would be destroyed before they could even target their weapons. You cannot simply point and shoot in modern space combat. It requires sophisticated AI, quantum targeting systems, and weapons that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The speaker of the collective nodded with all dozen of its bodies. The human approach to warfare is linear and predictable. They build bigger guns and thicker armor, like children playing with blocks. They do not understand that true military power comes from transcending such physical limitations. Admiral Parker maintained her diplomatic smile, but Morrison could see the anger in her eyes. His own crew was listening to every word, their faces carefully neutral but their body language tense. They knew what their ship could do. They had trained for years to use every system to its maximum potential, but the galaxy saw only an old ship with outdated weapons. Your fusion reactors are particularly quaint, added the architect. So inefficient, so loud, so mechanical. Our ships draw power directly from the cosmic background radiation. Silent, clean, virtually unlimited. Why do you persist with such antiquated technology? Chief Engineer Rodriguez stepped forward. Because it works, he said simply. When your exotic power systems fail, our reactors keep running. When your quantum computers crash, our mechanical systems still function. We build things to last. The aliens exchanged glances that might have been amusement. Ah, yes, Veltar said, the human obsession with reliability. But what good is a reliable system if it is too primitive to be effective? Your ships are like swords in an age of energy weapons. Impressive craftsmanship, perhaps, but ultimately useless. The exhibition continued around them, but Morrison found himself focusing on the alien ships visible through the station's viewports. They were beautiful, he had to admit. Sleek lines, impossible curves, hulls that seemed to be made of solidified light. They moved through space like dancers, graceful and perfect. His own ship sat in the docking bay like a chunk of industrial machinery, functional, sturdy, and thoroughly unimpressive. The Defiant had been built in Earth's orbital shipyards using techniques that had changed little in decades. Every component could be understood by a human engineer with basic training. Every system had manual backups and redundant safeguards. But Morrison remembered his training at the Naval Academy. He remembered the words of his first commander. Pretty ships win parades, ugly ships win wars. The conversation had moved on to other topics, but the damage was done. Word would spread throughout the exhibition that humanity had brought antiques to a showcase of advanced military technology. The other species would be polite, but they would not take Earth seriously as a military power. As the day wore on, Morrison watched the alien representatives discuss their various technologies. They spoke of weapons that could destroy planets, shields that existed in pocket dimensions, and engines that bent space itself. Everything was theoretical, beautiful, and utterly untested in real combat. The human delegation returned to their quarters that evening in silence. Admiral Parker dismissed the others and sat alone with Morrison in the small conference room they had been assigned. "That went about as expected," she said. "They think we're primitives," Morrison replied. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Parker said thoughtfully. "Let them underestimate us. Let them think our ships are museum pieces and our weapons are toys. Someday they might learn the difference between looking advanced and being effective." Morrison nodded, but he could not shake the feeling that humanity's reputation in the galaxy had just taken another step backward. The other species saw them as backward, primitive, possibly even irrelevant. It was a reputation that might take decades to overcome. He had no way of knowing that within days the galaxy would discover just how wrong they were about humanity's primitive ships and obsolete weapons. The mockery would end, but only after blood was spilled and legends were born among the stars. The alarm started as a low hum that grew louder until it filled every corridor of the space station. Captain Morrison was in his quarters aboard the Defiant when the sound reached him. He had heard that particular tone before during military exercises, but never in a real situation. It meant only one thing: incoming hostile fleet. Lieutenant Commander Collins burst through his door without knocking. "Sir, you need to get to the bridge immediately. Long-range sensors are picking up something massive approaching the system." Morrison was already reaching for his uniform jacket. "How massive?" "Big enough that the station's AI is having trouble counting individual ships. At least 1,000 contacts, possibly more." On the bridge of the Defiant, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. Chief Engineer Rodriguez had already begun bringing the ship's systems online. Weapons Officer Turner was running diagnostics on their weapons systems. The view screen showed the space around Kepler Prime, where dozens of alien vessels were breaking their elegant formations and moving into defensive positions. "What do we know about the incoming fleet?" Morrison asked as he settled into his command chair. Collins checked her instruments. "The computer identifies them as Devourer ships, sir. Machine intelligence, very old. They've been dormant for centuries, but something has woken them up." Morrison felt his blood turn cold. Every military officer in the galaxy learned about the Devourers during basic training. They were one of the ancient threats, machines that had conquered entire star systems, before mysteriously disappearing. Their ships were enormous geometric shapes covered in weapons, built for one purpose: destroying everything in their path. Admiral Parker's voice came through the communication system from the station. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker with emergency briefing. The approaching fleet consists of approximately 2,000 Devourer vessels. Each ship is roughly 1 kilometer in length, pyramid-shaped, and carries enough firepower to crack a planet. They will reach us in 6 hours." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. Turner was the first to speak. "Sir, our weapons won't even scratch ships that size." "Maybe," Morrison said. "Maybe not. Rodriguez, how long until we're ready for combat?" "The ship is always ready for combat, sir, but against those things..." The engineer shook his head. "I've seen the technical specifications. Their hulls are 3 meters of compressed metal and ceramic. Their shields can deflect antimatter explosions." On the station, panic was beginning to set in. The alien representatives who had been so confident during the exhibition were now scrambling to coordinate a defense. Through the communication channels, Morrison could hear the growing desperation in their voices. Admiral Zexhai of the Zephyrian Empire was trying to take command of the situation. "All vessels will form defensive formation Alpha 7 around the station. We will meet them with coordinated energy weapons fire and quantum torpedo salvos." "Negative," came the reply from the Hive Collective's command ship. "Our bio-vessels require formation Beta 3 for optimal neural network synchronization. Your energy weapons will interfere with our organic targeting systems." The architects added their own complications. "Neither formation accounts for our crystalline resonance fields. If we fire our harmonic weapons while your ships are using energy beams, the quantum interference will disable both weapon systems." Morrison listened to the arguing with growing frustration. The enemy was 6 hours away, and the galaxy's most advanced military minds were fighting over formation protocols. He opened a channel to Admiral Parker on the station. "Admiral, request permission to take an independent position. We'll move to intercept the enemy fleet before they reach the station." There was a long pause before Parker responded. "Jake, are you insane? Your ship would be vaporized before you got within weapons range." "Maybe, but at least we'd be doing something instead of arguing about formations." The argument over the comm channels was getting louder. The Luminari wanted to use their dimensional weapons, but they needed the other ships to stay at least 50 kilometers away to avoid being caught in the reality distortions. The hegemony's tree-like beings insisted their root ships needed to anchor themselves to asteroids for stability during combat. Every species had different requirements, different tactics, and different ideas about how to fight. "This is hopeless," Collins muttered from her station. "By the time they agree on a plan, the Devourers will be here." Morrison was about to respond when new contacts appeared on the sensors. The first wave of Devourer ships had arrived early, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were exactly as described, massive black pyramids bristling with weapons. Even at extreme range, their targeting systems were already scanning the defenders. "All ships engage the enemy," Admiral Zexhai commanded. "Formation Alpha 7, execute now." The alien fleet moved forward with impressive coordination. The Zephyrian ships led the charge, their crystal hulls gleaming as they built up energy for their main weapons. Behind them, the bioships of the Hive Collective pulsed with organic light as their neural networks calculated firing solutions. The architects brought up the rear, their mathematical perfection creating geometric patterns that were beautiful to watch. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a fireworks display. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the alien ships, striking the lead Devourer vessels with enough power to melt mountains. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside enemy shields and exploded with the force of small stars. Bioweapons that thought for themselves sought out weak points in the pyramid ships and attacked with surgical precision. For a moment, it looked like the advanced technology would prevail. Several Devourer ships took damage, their dark hulls cracking under the assault. But then the enemy returned fire and everything changed. The Devourer weapons were simple and brutal. They fired massive kinetic projectiles at tremendous speed. Chunks of metal the size of buildings that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. They used particle beams that stripped electrons from matter and left hulls brittle and weak. Most devastating of all, they used gravity weapons that created tiny black holes and flung them at their enemies. The first Zephyrian ship to die was the flagship of Admiral Zexhai himself. A kinetic projectile punched through its crystal hull like it was made of glass. The beautiful ship that had seemed so advanced cracked apart, its crew dying in the vacuum of space. The bioship trying to rescue survivors was caught by a gravity weapon and crushed into a ball of twisted metal and flesh. "My God," Collins whispered, watching the tactical display. "They're cutting through them like they're not even there." The alien formations, so carefully planned and coordinated, began to fall apart. Ships that had been designed to work together found themselves scattered and isolated. The sophisticated weapons that required precise positioning became useless when the formations broke down. Energy shields designed to deflect exotic particles offered no protection against chunks of metal moving at near light speed. Morrison watched as ship after ship fell to the Devourer assault. The architects tried to use their mathematical perfection to create defensive patterns, but the enemy simply overwhelmed them with brute force. The Luminaries' dimensional weapons created impressive reality distortions that did no damage to ships, built like flying fortresses. "Sir," Turner said from his weapons station, "we're receiving a direct order from Admiral Zexhai. All human ships are to retreat to minimum safe distance and await rescue operations." "He wants us to run?" Morrison asked. His exact words were, "Your primitive vessels would be destroyed in seconds. Leave this to species who understand modern warfare." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the battle. More than a dozen alien ships had been destroyed or disabled, while the Devourers had barely been scratched. The enemy wasn't using sophisticated tactics or advanced technology. They were simply built stronger and hit harder than anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. "Admiral Parker," he said into his communicator, "are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it, Jake. The advanced fleets are getting massacred out there, and they still want us to sit on the sidelines?" "Orders are orders, Captain." Morrison watched another bioship die under the Devourer guns. Its organic hull, designed to heal itself and adapt to damage, simply dissolved under the enemy's particle beams. The crew inside died screaming over open comm channels as their ship turned to dust around them. "Rodriguez," Morrison called to his engineer. "How long to bring our weapons online?" "Sir, we're not supposed to engage. Admiral Zexhai specifically ordered us to retreat. I didn't ask what we're supposed to do. I asked how long to bring our weapons online." Rodriguez grinned despite the situation. All systems are green, sir. We can fight right now if you give the word. The battle was turning into a slaughter. The Devourers had lost perhaps a dozen ships out of their vast fleet, while the Defenders had already lost a third of their forces. The remaining alien vessels were trying to regroup, but their careful formations had been shattered. They were fighting as individuals now, and individuals could not stand against the coordinated assault of the machine intelligence. "Sir," Collins said urgently, "I'm picking up communications from the Devourer fleet. They're broadcasting surrender, demands. They want us to lay down our weapons and prepare to be processed." The Defiant charged toward the largest Devourer ship like a missile aimed at a mountain. The enemy vessel was enormous, a black pyramid nearly 2 kilometers long with weapons covering every surface. Its guns were already turning toward the approaching human ship, targeting systems calculating the best way to destroy what looked like an easy target. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Admiral Zexhi's voice crackled over the comm system. His flagship was burning and half his fleet was already destroyed, but he still found time to criticize the human captain. "Your ship will be vaporized. Pull back immediately." Captain Morrison ignored the alien admiral and focused on his crew. "Rodriguez, I need full power to the railgun system. Collins, keep us on target no matter what they throw at us. Turner, prepare the main battery." "Sir," Turner said from his weapons station, "that ship is 3 times our size. Our weapons might not even penetrate its hull." "We'll see about that," Morrison replied. "Fire when ready." The Defiant's main weapon was not an energy beam or an exotic particle cannon. It was a railgun system that used electromagnetic fields to accelerate tungsten rods to nearly the speed of light. Each projectile weighed several tons and carried the kinetic energy of a nuclear bomb. The technology was old, simple, and completely reliable. The tungsten rod left the Defiant at a significant fraction of light speed. It covered the distance to the Devourer ship in less than a second and struck the pyramid's hull with devastating force. The impact created a shock wave that rippled through the entire structure, causing metal to buckle and systems to fail throughout the massive vessel. The alien observers watching from their damaged ships fell silent. They had never seen anything like it. The Devourer ship, which had shrugged off their most advanced weapons, suddenly had a hole punched completely through its hull. Atmosphere and debris poured out of the wound like blood from a mortal injury. "Impossible," whispered the speaker of the Hive Collective. "That was just a kinetic projectile. How did it penetrate armor designed to withstand antimatter explosions?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez, monitoring the hit from his station, could have explained it. To them, the alien weapons were designed to be sophisticated and precise. They delivered their energy in complex patterns that could be deflected or absorbed by equally sophisticated defenses. But there was no sophisticated defense against a chunk of metal moving at near light speed. Physics was physics, and kinetic energy was the most basic force in the universe. The Devourer ship tried to return fire, but the damage to its systems was more severe than it appeared. The railgun projectile had not just punched a hole in the hull, it had sent shockwaves through the entire structure, disrupting power systems and damaging the ancient computer networks that controlled the ship's weapons. "Turner, follow up with mass drivers and plasma cannons," Morrison ordered. The Defiant's secondary weapons opened fire in a coordinated barrage. Mass drivers launched asteroids at the enemy ship like bullets from a gun. Plasma cannons stripped electrons from matter and hurled the resulting energy in focused beams. Nuclear missiles with warheads measured in megatons sought out weak points in the enemy hull and exploded with tremendous force. To the alien observers, it looked like something from their prehistoric past. These were not the elegant weapons of modern warfare. They were the crude tools of a species that had learned to fight in the gravity wells of planets, where every shot had to count and every weapon had to work regardless of conditions. But crude did not mean ineffective. The Devourer ship, designed to resist the sophisticated attacks it had faced for millennia, found itself helpless against weapons that should have been obsolete. Its hull, optimized for deflecting energy beams, crumpled under the impact of solid matter. Its shields, calibrated to stop exotic particles, offered no protection against nuclear explosions and kinetic impacts. "This is Captain Pete Johnson of the UES Ranger," came a voice over the comm system. We're moving to support the Defiant. Two more human ships emerged from their positions near the station. The Ranger and the Warrior looked just as primitive as the Defiant, with their scarred hulls and visible weapon systems. But they moved with the confidence of warships that had been built for one purpose: winning battles. Captain Johnson's ship opened fire on a second Devourer vessel. Its rail, guns sending tungsten projectiles through space at incredible speed. The enemy ship, confident in its superior technology, made no attempt to evade. The first projectile punched through its forward armor like paper. The second struck its main reactor and caused a chain reaction that lit up the interior like a star. Captain Mary Sullivan's Warrior engaged a third Devourer ship, using its mass drivers to hurl chunks of asteroid at the enemy hull. Each impact sent shockwaves through the pyramid structure, disrupting systems and causing progressive damage that the ship's automated repair systems could not handle. The three human ships worked together with a coordination that spoke of extensive training and combat experience. They did not use sophisticated formation patterns or complex maneuvers. Instead, they fought like a pack of wolves, supporting each other and focusing their attacks on individual targets until each enemy ship was destroyed. How are they doing this? Admiral Zexhai asked over the open comm channel. His voice carried a mixture of amazement and disbelief. Those are primitive weapons: chemical propulsion, kinetic projectiles, nuclear explosives. This should not be possible. Chief Engineer Rodriguez finally answered the question that everyone was asking. Your people build weapons to impress other engineers, he said calmly, while monitoring his ship's systems. We build them to kill things efficiently. The difference was fundamental. The alien weapons were marvels of engineering, designed to showcase their creators' technological advancement. They required exotic materials, complex targeting systems, and sophisticated power sources. When they worked, they were impressive. But they were also fragile, dependent on perfect conditions and regular maintenance. The human weapons were different. They had been designed by a species that had fought countless wars over thousands of years. Every component had been tested in battle, refined through experience, and built to function under the worst possible conditions. They were not beautiful or elegant, but they worked when everything else failed. Weapons Officer Turner coordinated the Defiant's fire with deadly precision. Target their weapon clusters, he called out to the other human ships. Cripple their ability to fight back, then go for their power systems. The human fleet expanded as more ships arrived from the outer system. Captain Bill Roberts brought the UES Guardian into the fight, followed by Captain Linda Hayes with the UES Defender. Each ship carried the same obsolete weapons, and each one began systematically destroying Devourer vessels with frightening efficiency. The alien observers could barely believe what they were seeing. Ships they had dismissed as museum pieces were accomplishing what their advanced fleets could not. The Devourers, facing weapons they did not understand and could not counter, began to show something that surprised everyone: hesitation. They're pulling back, Collins reported from her sensor station. The Devourer fleet is regrouping at the edge of the system. Morrison studied the tactical display. The human ships had destroyed nearly 30 enemy vessels without losing a single ship of their own. Their primitive weapons had proven devastatingly effective against targets that the galaxy's most advanced technology could barely scratch. But the victory came with a cost that went beyond battle damage. The aliens who had mocked humanity's ships now watched in stunned silence as their entire understanding of modern warfare was proven wrong. The sophisticated weapons they had spent centuries developing were useless against an enemy that the humans were destroying with apparent ease. Lieutenant Commander Collins coordinated the fleet's electronic warfare systems, using techniques that predated quantum computing, but proved remarkably effective against the Devourer's ancient programming. The machine intelligence found its communication networks jammed by interference patterns that followed no recognizable protocol, and its targeting systems corrupted by viruses that should not have been able to penetrate their defenses. Sir, Turner reported, the remaining Devourer ships are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. It sounds like they're trying to analyze our weapons and develop countermeasures. Let them try, Morrison replied. Rodriguez, how are our systems holding up? All green across the board, sir. These old fusion reactors just keep humming along. While the alien ships are dealing with exotic power system failures and quantum computer crashes, we're running on technology that a caveman could understand and repair with a hammer. The battle had revealed something that the galaxy had forgotten in its pursuit of technological sophistication. Advanced did not always mean better. Sometimes the most effective solution was also the simplest one. The humans had not tried to match the aliens' technological achievements. Instead, they had perfected the basics of warfare until their primitive weapons became devastatingly effective. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the comm from the warrior. "Defiant, we're detecting movement from the main Devourer fleet. Looks like they're preparing for a coordinated assault." Morrison looked at the tactical display. Admiral Lisa Parker stood in the command center of the space station, watching the tactical displays with growing amazement. What had started as a desperate last stand was turning into something else entirely. The human fleet, now numbering 30, ships that had, coincidentally, been conducting training exercises in nearby systems, was moving through space with a coordination that made the alien formations look clumsy by comparison. "How many ships did you actually bring to this exhibition?" asked Admiral Zexhai. The Zephyrian commander's flagship was barely functional, held together by emergency repairs and the determination of his surviving crew. "Officially? 3 ships for the exhibition," Parker replied. "Unofficially, we always keep a full battle group within range of our diplomatic missions, just in case." The human fleet moved like a single organism, unlike the alien formations that relied on individual ship superiority. Every human vessel fought as part of a larger whole. Captain Morrison's Defiant led the spearhead, its weapons clearing a path through the Devourer formations. Captain Johnson's Ranger provided covering fire, its mass drivers hurling asteroids at any enemy ship that tried to flank the formation. Captain Sullivan's Warrior performed surgical strikes on damaged targets, finishing off ships that the main assault had crippled. "This is impossible," muttered the speaker of the Hive Collective. "Their weapons are centuries behind ours. Their ships move like they have chemical rockets instead of gravity drives. How are they winning?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez heard the I question through the open comm channels and decided to answer. His voice carried the calm confidence of someone who understood exactly what was happening. "We don't build pretty ships that win parades. We build ugly ships that win wars." The difference was becoming clear to everyone watching. The alien vessels had been designed to showcase their species' technological achievements. Every system was a marvel of engineering, every weapon a masterpiece of exotic physics. But they had been built by species that had not fought a real war in centuries. Their crews were technicians and scientists, not soldiers. The human ships told a different story. Every scar on their hulls spoke of battles fought and won. Every weapon system had been tested not in computer simulations but in actual combat. The crews moved with the unconscious coordination of people who had trained together for years, who trusted each other completely, and who knew that their survival depended on their ability to work as a team. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display as the Devourer fleet regrouped for another assault. The enemy had learned from their initial defeats and was adapting their tactics. Instead of sending individual ships forward to be destroyed, they were massing their forces for a coordinated attack. "Collins, what's their formation looking like?" he asked. "Standard pyramid assault pattern, sir. They're putting their heaviest ships in front to absorb our fire while the smaller vessels move around the flanks. Classic hammer and anvil tactics." Morrison nodded. The Devourers might be ancient machines, but they understood the basics of warfare. Unfortunately for them, so did humanity. "All human ships, this is Morrison. Execute formation, Delta 7. We're going to show them what real coordination looks like." The human fleet scattered like leaves in the wind, each ship moving in a different direction. To the alien observers, it looked like panic. To the Devourers, it looked like confusion. But to anyone who understood human military doctrine, it was poetry in motion. Captain Johnson's Ranger dove toward the asteroid belt, using the rocky debris as cover while his crew prepared for a flanking maneuver. Captain Sullivan's Warrior climbed above the plane of battle, positioning herself for a strike at the enemy's weak point. A dozen other human ships took positions that seemed random, but were actually part of a complex three-dimensional formation that would allow them to concentrate their fire from multiple angles. "Sir," reported Weapons Officer Turner, "the Devourers are moving to engage. They're splitting their formation to chase our scattered ships." "Perfect," Morrison said. "That's exactly what we want them to do." The Devourers had fallen into the oldest trap in military history. Faced with what appeared to be a fleeing enemy, they had abandoned their coordinated formation to pursue individual targets. It was the same mistake that countless armies had made throughout human history, and humanity had learned how to exploit it centuries ago. "All ships, execute Phase 2, Morrison ordered. The scattered human vessels suddenly reversed course and converged on the dispersed Devourer ships. Instead of facing a coordinated enemy formation, the ancient machines found themselves fighting dozens of individual battles against opponents who outnumbered them at each point of contact. Captain Johnson emerged from the asteroid belt with chunks of rock spinning around his ship like a shield. His mass drivers hurled the debris at enemy vessels while his railguns punched holes through their hulls. Captain Sullivan dove from above, her weapons targeting the command and control systems that the Devourers needed to coordinate their attacks. Other human ships moved with similar precision, each one exploiting the advantages that their primitive technology provided. Their fusion reactors could not be disrupted by electromagnetic interference. Their mechanical targeting systems did not rely on quantum computers that could be hacked or confused. Their weapons worked in any environment, under any conditions, with minimal maintenance required. Lieutenant Commander Collins coordinated the electronic warfare from her station aboard the Defiant. The techniques she used were older than most galactic civilizations, but they proved remarkably effective against the Devourers' ancient programming. The machine intelligence found its communication networks jammed by signals that should not have been able to penetrate their encryption, and its tactical programs corrupted by viruses that followed no known protocols. "How are they doing this?" asked the architect representative watching the battle from the station. "Our quantum warfare systems could not penetrate the Devourer networks. How are primitive electronic countermeasures succeeding where advanced technology failed?" The answer was simple, though it took Admiral Parker several minutes to explain it in terms the aliens could understand. The Devourers had been built to resist the sophisticated attacks they had faced for millennia. Their defenses were calibrated to stop quantum viruses, dimensional intrusions, and exotic particle bombardments. But they had no defense against techniques so basic that most species had forgotten they existed. Collins was using radio jamming, frequency hopping, and signal analysis methods that dated back to humanity's early space age. The Devourers' ancient systems, designed to resist far more advanced attacks, were helpless against electronic warfare techniques that predated their own existence. As the battle continued, it became clear that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from that of the other galactic species. The aliens had spent centuries developing increasingly sophisticated ways to fight, but they had forgotten the basic principles that made warfare effective. Humans had never forgotten. Every weapon system on their ships was designed to kill efficiently. Every tactical doctrine was based on actual combat experience. Every crew member was trained not just to operate their equipment, but to fight as part of a team that would never abandon its comrades, sir, Turner reported. "We're receiving surrender signals from 3 Devourer ships. They're requesting terms for withdrawal." Morrison looked at the tactical display. In less than 2 hours, the human fleet had destroyed or disabled nearly half of the enemy force. Ships that had seemed invincible were now drifting wrecks, their ancient systems finally overcome by weapons and tactics they could not understand or counter. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender when every ship in their fleet is either destroyed or heading back where they came from," Morrison replied. "We didn't start this fight, but we're going to finish it." The alien representatives on the station watched in stunned silence as the battle continued. The ships they had mocked as primitive were systematically destroying an enemy that their own advanced fleets could not handle. The weapons they had dismissed as obsolete were proving more effective than anything their civilizations had developed. But more than the technology, it was the crews that made the difference. The human sailors fought with a determination that went beyond mere duty. They protected each other, trusted each other, and refused to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. It was something that the galaxy had not seen in centuries. Warriors who understood that sometimes survival required more than advanced technology. It required the will to fight, the skill to win, and the courage to never surrender. These were qualities that humanity had cultivated for thousands of years, through countless wars and endless struggles. They were the reason that human ships looked primitive but fought like legends. The Devourers were learning this lesson the hard way, as their ancient fleet was torn apart by weapons that should have been obsolete and tactics that should have been forgotten. The machine intelligence was discovering that sometimes the old ways worked not because they were simple, but because they had been perfected through blood and sacrifice over millennia of warfare. The galaxy was witnessing the true nature of human military power, and it was nothing like what they had expected. Dawn broke over Kepler Prime as the final wave of Devourer ships dropped out of hyperspace. The machine intelligence had called in every vessel it could reach, throwing everything it had left at the human fleet in one desperate attempt to break through their defenses. Over 2,000 ships emerged from the darkness between stars, each one broadcasting the same message: surrender or be destroyed. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the massive enemy fleet arrange itself into attack formation. His ship bore the scars of hours of combat, but every system was still functional. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of veterans who had done the impossible and were ready to do it again. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Collins, "we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer command ship. They're demanding our immediate surrender." "Put it on the main screen," Morrison said. The image that appeared was not what anyone expected. Instead of the cold mechanical voice they had heard before, a figure that looked almost human appeared on the screen. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of dark metal and eyes that glowed with artificial light. "I am the Central Intelligence of the Devourer fleet," it said in a voice that carried the weight of millennia. "Your species has proven more capable than we anticipated. We offer you one final chance to surrender. Join us and your people will be preserved as valuable assets. Refuse and we will strip this system bare and use the materials to build 10,000 more ships." Morrison looked at the alien representatives who were watching from the station. Admiral Zexhai, his flagship barely holding together. The speaker of the Hive Collective, its dozen bodies trembling with fear. The architect delegate, its crystalline form cracked from the stress of watching its assumptions about warfare prove completely wrong. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Defiant," he said, his voice carrying across every communication channel in the system. "You picked the wrong species to threaten. We've been fighting wars since before your civilization existed, and we'll be fighting them long after your last ship is scrap metal." The Devourer intelligence tilted its head, processing this response with circuits that had calculated the destruction of countless worlds. "Your confidence is admirable but misplaced. We have analyzed your weapons and tactics. Our ships now carry countermeasures against your kinetic projectiles and primitive electronic warfare. This battle will end differently." Morrison smiled grimly. "You're welcome to try." The final battle began with a display of firepower that dwarfed everything that had come before. The Devourer fleet moved forward in perfect coordination. 2,000 ships advancing like a wall of death across the system. Their weapons lit up space with beams of energy that could crack planets, while their newly installed armor deflected the first human attacks with apparent ease. But humanity had learned a few things during the long night of battle. Captain Johnson's voice came through the comm system from the Ranger. "Morrison, they've reinforced their hulls against kinetic weapons. Our railguns aren't getting through." "Then we adapt," Morrison replied calmly. "Turner, switch to penetrator. Rounds. Rodriguez, give me everything the reactor can handle." The human fleet changed tactics without missing a beat. Instead of the tungsten rods they had been using, the railguns now fired depleted uranium penetrators designed to punch through any armor. The mass drivers launched not asteroids, but specially shaped charges that focused their explosive force into narrow beams. The nuclear missiles carried new warheads that created electromagnetic pulses designed to fry the Devourer's newly installed countermeasures. The aliens watching from the station saw something they had never witnessed before. A military force that could adapt its tactics in real time, changing its entire approach to warfare in the middle of a battle. The human ships moved like a living thing, each part responding to new threats while maintaining perfect coordination with the whole. "Impossible," whispered the architect representative. "They're using weapons we've never seen before. Where did they get penetrator rounds? How are they manufacturing new ammunition in the middle of combat?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez answered while his hands flew over his control panels. "Every human ship carries machine shops and fabrication units. We build what we need when we need it. You aliens might have forgotten how to improvise, but we never did." The battle raged across the system as both sides poured everything they had into the fight. Devourer ships died by the dozens, their ancient hulls finally overwhelmed by weapons that adapted faster than their defenses could evolve. But the humans were paying a price too. Captain Sullivan's warrior took a direct hit from a gravity weapon and began breaking apart, its hull crushed by forces that could bend space itself. "This is Sullivan," came her voice over the comm. Calm despite the fact that her ship was dying around her. "My engines are gone and life support is failing. I'm going to ram the command ship. Tell my crew's families they died like heroes." The warrior's final charge became the stuff of legend. Using her last functioning thrusters, Sullivan aimed her broken ship at the largest Devourer vessel and accelerated to ramming speed. The impact when she hit was visible from the station, a flash of light that marked the death of both ships and the moment when the tide of battle turned forever. The Devourer command ship, the vessel that had coordinated the entire invasion, broke apart under the impact. Its destruction sent shockwaves through the machine intelligence that had controlled the fleet for thousands of years. For the first time in millennia, the Central Intelligence experienced something it had never felt before. "Doubt. All ships, focus fire on the command vessels," Morrison ordered. "Take out their coordination and the rest will fall apart." The human fleet converged on the remaining Devourer command ships with terrifying efficiency. Railguns fired depleted. Uranium rounds that punched through reinforced armor like paper. Mass drivers hurled shaped charges that exploded inside enemy hulls. Nuclear missiles detonated in precise patterns that created electromagnetic storms capable of frying any electronic. System. Chief Engineer Rodriguez kept the Defiant running despite battle damage that would have crippled any other ship. Weapons Officer Turner maintained his firing solutions, even as his control panels exploded around him. Lieutenant Commander Collins coordinated the fleet's movements while simultaneously jamming enemy communications with techniques that predated galactic civilization. The alien representatives watched in awe as humanity demonstrated something they had forgotten in their pursuit of technological perfection: the warrior spirit. The humans didn't fight because their weapons were superior. They fought because they refused to lose, because they had learned over thousands of years that sometimes survival required more than advanced technology. It required courage, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The end came suddenly. The Central Intelligence, faced with the systematic destruction of its fleet and the loss of coordination that had kept it functional for millennia, made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of fighting to the last ship, it ordered a retreat. "All units, withdraw to hyperspace," came the mechanical voice over the communication channels. "This engagement is concluded." The surviving Devourer ships, barely a quarter of the original force, jumped to hyperspace and disappeared into the darkness between stars. The ancient threat that had seemed unstoppable was fleeing from ships that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive museum pieces. In the aftermath, the space around Kepler Prime was littered with debris from both fleets. The human ships that remained operational moved among the wreckage, searching for survivors and salvaging what they could. The alien vessels, those that had survived the initial assault, hung motionless in space while their crews tried to process what they had witnessed. Admiral Zexhai was the first to break the silence. His voice, once full of arrogance and condescension, now carried genuine respect. "Admiral Parker, Captain Morrison, I owe you an apology. We underestimated your species completely." Admiral Parker's response became the foundation of humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy. We don't build ships to look impressive, Admiral. We build them to come home, and we crew them with people who understand that sometimes the old ways work because they've been tested by time. The alien representatives who had mocked humanity's ancient ships now looked at them with new eyes. The scarred hulls and primitive weapons no longer seemed like signs of backwardness. They were marks of experience, proof that these ships had been built by a species that understood the true nature of warfare. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching as recovery teams worked to clear the debris field. His ship would need weeks of repairs, but it was still functional, still ready to fight if necessary. Around him, his crew tended to their duties with the quiet professionalism of people who had done their job and done it well. The mockery had ended. The laughter had been replaced by respect, and respect had been earned with blood and courage under fire. As news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, a new phrase entered common usage among spacefaring species. Built like a human. Ship. It meant sturdy, reliable, and capable of performing far beyond expectations when everything was on the line.